here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Well, I'm doing an update to Building Your Preparedness Library, but I think I'm going to call it Building Your Self-Sufficiency Library, because we're covering a whole bunch of things, not just about being prepared, but having books on hand on how to do things, take care of things, or just keep yourself entertained is part of being prepared. So it fits under both. So let's start off with books related to homesteading and self-sufficiency in particular. So what I recommend really is finding, when it comes to any of these topics actually, that you find older vintage or antique books that you can base a lot of this off of. But you don't have to stop there. There's a lot of great newer books out there. Right here is an example of a few homesteading related books. So I've got, obviously, though I never use it, I like to have the book on hand in case I ever need it, the Complete Book of Home Preserving. I shouldn't say I never use it. I do sometimes get in here and use it as a basic guideline. There's a lot of recipes and whatnot in here that aren't really my thing. I mostly like coming up with my own recipes and then basically just want something to use as a guideline for times when it comes to water bath and pressure canning and the different types of foods I'm putting up. So having a good canning book on hand is, I believe, is important. However, the book I tend to go to the most when it comes to that is the book that came with my All-American canner, because it just covers the basics, and that's typically all I need. I don't need a lot of fancy recipes. And then this would be an expensive investment if you bought them new, but you can find used ones, like, well, any books you can find used, but that would be the Foxfire series, which I can't remember, is it 10 or 11 books in the series, or 12? And I actually found, I think a year or two ago, the full series. It was about a couple $100, but they're new, they're not used, and I was able to get the full series, and that ended up being a pretty good deal. I don't know if it's still available, but if I got it on Amazon like that, and if it is still available, I'll put the link to that down below. But these books were written quite some time ago, and it's a compilation of different authors who put just a lot of how-to information in there. These are people that lived, in the Appalachia area. In fact, my father-in-law, because he was born in North Carolina, but part of his growing up years there, he knew some of the people that had contributed to these different books. And then another just kind of one-stop, all-in-one great homesteading related book would be the Encyclopedia of Country Living. It has pretty much everything in it. So if you were just going to start with just one book, this is the one I would say you should go with. You see how thick it is, and it has small writing. There is a ton of information. This is the most cost-effective way to go. Because when I bought this, I don't know what it is now, but when I bought this, it was $20 for this massive book, and it has everything in it. From gardening to raising chickens, herbal remedies, how to build a barn, mill your own flour, forage, make soap, and much, much more. So in my personal opinion, for the cost, this is going to be the best place to start in having something that's going to help you just be more self-sufficient and frugal. So yes, I highly recommend it. I will definitely provide the link to this in the description box. Now, I don't necessarily think you should run out and buy all the books I'm showing you. A lot of this is to give you examples. And so right there are some great ideas for homesteading. I think this one could very likely fit just well into homesteading related books. It's called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. I've had this one for quite a number of years. There's a lot of recipes in here, but also just a lot of really, really great information. So going along with the theme of homesteading books, let's go next into cookbooks. So again, when it comes to cookbooks, I have no interest in new cookbooks. I really don't. A lot of your newer cookbooks, in fact, I don't use cookbooks that much, but if someday I decide, gosh, I would like to learn how to make this or that from scratch, because that's something I've never done, before. Right now, because it's so much easier, I simply look for recipes online and compile the different recipes. But in the event I don't have access to the internet, I do have several books in regards to that subject that are all vintage and even antique. Like this one here, I think this was from 1890. This one was sent to me from one of my followers, and it's called The Compendium of Cookery and Reliable Recipes. Then I have this cookbook I found for 50 cents at a garage sale. I love this one. Whenever I've been wanting to find a recipe for something that I've never tried making before, and I can't find anything I find that's good information on the internet, I go to this book right here. Now, why do I say vintage or even antique books when it comes to cooking? Well, because back then they didn't have recipes that said, take a box of Jiffy cornbread or a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup or whatever. You actually learned how to make these things yourself. You made your cornbread from scratch like I do. I've never bought Jiffy cornbread. I did used to buy the Campbell's soup until I realized, you know what? I can make this myself. This is easy. And so I just made up my own recipe to come up with the same idea when I'm using it for making casseroles. And it doesn't always have to be cream of mushroom. All you got to do is basically make a white sauce and add to it whatever you want. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. What if you don't have access to Campbell's cream of mushroom soup or Jiffy cornbread mix? You're going to need to know how to make these things from scratch. So that's why I say go with your older cookbooks for certain, that don't rely on convenience foods to make a meal. And then the next one would be herb books. So I've talked about this quite a bit, and I want to give you a bit of an update on that. And I still stick to the same books. As far as looking for just a good overall book that's got recipes and suggestions, as well as breakdowns of the benefits of various herbs, I do still recommend Amy Fields' book, The Homesteader's Herbal Companion. Really well put together book. But if you're wanting a book, I actually think is a good idea to have kind of all of the above. The three basic ones, something that can give you an idea for recipes, but usually what I'm going to go to is a book that is an encyclopedia. Like right here, I ended up with two Rodale's Encyclopedia of Herbs. This one is from the 1970s. I think this one's from the 90s. I didn't realize I had already had one, but I found them both at garage sales for like 50 cents a piece. Different garage sales, different years. And then I realized, oh, I actually have two of these. This one's a little nicer because the newer one, because it has colored images in it, where this just has drawings. But I do like the fact that I have both. So having a good encyclopedia where you want to go look up a specific herb, you can look that up and find out what the benefits of those are, if you know it's something that already grows in your area. And then, of course, the other thing that I think is highly important is having a book that is more tailored to your area. Like this company makes, for the United States, makes books. I think there's 6 books within the series that cover different regions of the United States. So obviously this, actually it was Mary from Mary's Nest that sent me this book as a gift. So Pacific Northwest medicinal plants. Now that doesn't mean all of these plants grow wild in our specific area, but throughout the Pacific Northwest. And our area is quite unique from the rest of the Pacific Northwest, but I am going to be more likely to find the herbs that are in this book in our area. And it also does cover the medicinal uses of those herbs. So this is why I do recommend having the 3 different types. One that gives you a list of what grows wild already in your area, a book that can give you ideas on how to use them, and then a book that is an encyclopedia like down here. Now this one on top was sent to me from a follower from Australia. So I don't know how easy it is to get this book in the United States. I tried to find it. I would assume in Australia you can get it easier. I tried to find it on Amazon, and it's really difficult to find it on there. And when you do, it's like incredibly expensive. But anyway, she bought this book and sent it to me. So Isabel Shippard is the name, and how can I use herbs in my daily life? There is going to be a lot of the herbs that are here that do grow in our area, but this is more specific to Australia. So if you live in Australia, then this would be a good idea if you don't already have this book. Now, another area of self-sufficiency would be a way to take care of yourself, besides the herbs. This leads right into medical books. Now, the one I couldn't find, I don't know where it is unless I let somebody borrow it. These came out in the early 90s or late 80s, and that was the Doctor's Book of Home Remedies. And I loved that book especially when my kids were young, and because a lot of it was just stuff most people already have on hand or can easily run down to the store and get. And most of the ideas in there are natural based. And so that was a great book to have on hand. Now, I haven't needed to use that in a long time because now I'm already growing a lot of different herbs and stuff that I use myself. But I remember one time my little brother, he was over and he had a really bad canker sore on his lip. And so he was a teenager at the time, and he tended to get those a lot back then. And so I pulled out the book and found that whole milk is an excellent cure for canker sores because of the enzymes in your whole milk. Even cream would work, or half and half. And so he started making a poultice and putting it on there, and it actually healed it up pretty quickly. And then some other things I always recommend is the American Medical Association Encyclopedia of Medicine. And this one is from late 80s. I've had it for a very long time. It's been very helpful. Really what it does is it helps you to assess maybe some different things going on. And as I've shared before, whenever I've talked about this, on 2 different occasions, I was able to figure out by looking up all the symptoms in this book and going to the different areas until I finally narrowed it down what was wrong with my oldest son when he was 5 years old, and he was losing weight, and he was just looking more and more gaunt every day, just not feeling good, very, very gassy, and just could not figure out what was happening. I always like to have an idea before I run my kids to the doctor because we didn't have health insurance back then. We couldn't afford to just run to the doctor for every tiny little thing. And I finally figured out that it had to have been Giardia that he got from our lake, because it was shortly after he had been swimming out at a local lake that tends to have a lot of ducks in it, and he very likely swallowed some contaminated water. And sure enough, and of course, I did still take him to the doctor and verified that's what it was, and we were able to get him back. In that case, we did get some medication that killed the parasite, and immediately he started turning around and putting on weight like normal. And so that was very helpful. And then the same thing actually a couple of years prior when my youngest son was born, and I ended up getting a head to toe rash. None of the doctors around here knew what it was. So I started doing my own research using this book. And back then, there was very, very limited information to find out. We're talking 29 years ago. But I was able to figure it out before the doctors did by having this book on hand and able to narrow it down. And back then it had a different name than it has now. Back then they called it gestational herpes, which actually is an incorrect name and has since been changed to gestational pemphigoid. And it's a rare condition that some women get, and it stems off the hormones that are produced during pregnancy. But even in my case, most of it happened right after my son was born, and didn't have very many symptoms of it during the pregnancy itself. So, so that's just an example how I was able to figure out, especially the rare condition that back then hardly anyone knew anything. I had to go to a specialist in Seattle to figure it out for sure. And sure enough, I was right, because by that time I had figured it out according to this book. So that's why this book I think is really handy. But then there's also, you can find, I have 2 of them. Another one that was sent to me by one of my subscribers, and this one I think is from 1930, and this is the American Pocket Medical Dictionary. I love vintage and antique books anyway, so I collect them. And then this one right here, I got for 99 cents at a local garage sale. Let me see if I can pull this out without everything falling over. And this is the Home Physician and Guide to Health. And this one, I believe, is from 1922. So I thought it was worth the $1 to have this on hand. Now, obviously, we have different advancements in medicine now than back then. However, you also have to consider that these older books are going to be based more on what's available. I mean, there's, if you don't have all these new medications that you can get your hands on, you're going to need something to know how to be able to deal with these things more naturally based on what's around you. This is why the herbal books and all this fits in, and knowing how to take care of some of these things. And then also, even if you can't go to a doctor or use the medicines maybe recommended in here, which I probably wouldn't recommend that anyway, having an encyclopedia to help you at least be able to narrow down what it possibly could be. This is incredibly helpful. Now, behind me here, something you certainly don't want to forget is having good children's books. Now, not just behind me, but here on this side, I have a massive pile of vintage and antique children's books. I have this book. This one here is the first in a series of 10, and they produced a book every year. And the first one, I think, was 1901. So that would be this one, then the next year and the next year and next year. And with each book, they get progressively more difficult because they're readers. This one is meant for the youngest age children and more to be read to them. And so we've been reading to the kids out of this. And then there's some other kids' books here. This is also a reader that's more for 4th grade. I actually ended up with this while my kids were still young and I was homeschooling them. And so they used this book. And there's just a couple other. I've got Aesop's Fables. I can't remember how old this one is. 1947. And so a lot of these things were picked up at garage sales. Like this whole set of 10 books, I have all 10 of them. They're like brand new. Even as old as they were, obviously there was something somebody put away in their attic and forgot about. I don't think anyone ever used them. I paid $2 for the whole set. Absolutely 100% worth it. You have your standard, like your little golden books that I picked. All of these little golden books but one I've picked up at garage sales, and we've been the kids love them. We've been reading them to the kids. They're always bringing them to us. The only one I bought brand new, because I never found it at a garage sale, was this one. A very, very important one. The Little Red Hen. And another one I found at a garage sale, which was one of my favorites when I was a little girl, and my grandkids love this book, is The Snowy Day. It's just such a great book. And another garage sale find, which was a book I had the whole set of these books, so I'd kind of like to find more of these. I loved the I Can Read books when I was a little girl. The kids also really enjoy this. So having books for various age children is incredibly important, not only to help them to learn how to read, but just to have some things that they can do for entertainment. And then for the kids, I also saved all of the homeschooling books I used. So the science-related books, the math, the reading, I saved all that stuff so I could use that with my grandchildren or to pass it on to whoever may need them. So if you're already homeschooling, don't get rid of those books. Keep them on hand. You might need them for your grandkids, or you might know someone else who may need them. And these are just a few categories for you to consider. Again, remember, there's a lot of books you can find secondhand on various places online, in local places. A lot of times schools are getting rid of perfectly great books that have good information. In fact, this one right here was from a school. I've got 3 readers that are beyond antique because they're over 100 years old that were discarded from a school, the school district in the next town over. And I love having those. They're all readers. And it's amazing when you go look at like just what a 4th grade reader is. Kids in high school aren't reading at that level right now. So this is, again, why I say look at your older books. They're going to be far more educational than what you're going to find in your newer books. And you can save a lot of money doing that too, getting secondhand books. So let me go over these basic areas again, just to just to see the categories I have here. So your homesteading books, your herb books, your local foraging books. I forgot to mention that can fall under herb books, but that, you might look for books that are going to also talk about the types of foods and stuff that are available in your area. Just like around here, there's lots of chanterelle mushrooms in the fall. We have tons of apples, tons of blackberries all over the place out here. You have your medical books, cookbooks, children's books, gardening books, and books just simply for enjoyment. So those are the main categories, and I'm sure there's more I could add to that. And if you have any other ideas, thoughts, or suggestions, or maybe suggestions for some specific books that you would highly recommend, please put those in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.